Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster from SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and I am joined today by Imogen Poots, who is currently starring in the movie VIVARIUM, which is available on video on demand, and the upcoming HBO series, I Know This Much Is True. Before we kick it off, I just wanted to remind everyone that we are raising money for SAG-AFTRA members who are currently out of work due to all the closed productions, and details of our COVID-19 fund can be found directly below here in the event description. Thank you so much for joining us today, Imogen. I know you were just saying that you were in New York and you had to make a decision as to whether to stay there or go back to England.
I did, yes. It was just a couple of weeks ago, and everything changed quite quickly over those 24 hours. So I made the decision to come back to the UK, but it's always hard leaving New York, and it's harder when something like that is happening there in the city. It's certainly strange times for all of us, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Have you been navigating doing a movie release in amongst all of this? Because the movie luckily was already planned for video on demand release.
Yes, it was. It is strange. If I'm totally honest, it's strange doing interviews for a film in general, because it feels totally irrelevant and incongruous with what's happening right now. Just to be like, and we made a film. I'm going to talk about my career with these people. But it just seems slightly odd. But at the same time, because of what the movie is about, there's some solace in that, because you think, well, is actually reflecting something pretty potent, accidentally. We didn't intend for this, but you sort of have to just take that on board and remember that everybody who made it, in it and behind it, wants it to have a life of some kind. So if it's not the movie theatres, VOD is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah. And I know from our end, we just want to help support all these projects, and everybody's at home looking for things to watch right now as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's huge, and the organisation that SAG that you mentioned have put together is huge, because it's the number of productions that not only have been postponed but have just been totally muted and may not come back to life again. And I know the same with Broadway shows. And actors and stagehands and everyone involved in that is trying their best to support each other, because it is it's very, very difficult for a lot of the folks out there in our industry and beyond.
Yeah, it's tough times all over, but the one positivity is I feel like there's a really nice way that everyone's coming together at the moment and support each other. Talking of the movie, you're playing a character, Gemma, and her partner Tom are looking for a house to build, and they end up trapped in a suburb where it's just them and they really can't escape. And I was interested, obviously, because that wasn't the world that we were living in, but there's a parallel to that at the moment, how you thought about the mindset of being trapped in that one space when you were actually making the film.
Yes, well, what's wild is obviously it was a horrible idea and really traumatic and claustrophobic and all of those things, but it also did seem just like any subject in a horror movie or a sci-fi film. It just seemed like, of course, isn't going to happen. It's at arm's length, the idea that your reality would be so shifted, and that you would start to live in this absurd world. Obviously, the clouds look the way they are and the house has that specific colour. But outside of that, it's pretty paralleled right now, I think, with a lot of our experiences, especially the idea of parents with their children, when you would have expected to have your children at school or being fed at school, or being entertained and educated at school. The idea of that tight-knit family group being glued together and stuck together is, it's really strange, really, really, really wild. And the idea of time, I always felt when we were making the film, this notion that you'd have this long stretch of time and no end in sight, and sort of wondering if you are forgotten because you're no longer part of the society that you were just days ago. It's sort of all of that is very, very eerie.
Yeah. One of the things I found really interesting about the idea of your performance is there's so many different ways that you can emotionally respond to that situation. So how did you set about navigating from within the script what you thought Gemma's emotional journey throughout it would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think I was concerned at the start of the filming as to what the tone of the piece was, and what that would prove to be, because it's so hard at the beginning to know exactly. It's often found in post, or the director's got an idea and he's sort of going to jigsaw puzzle it together. But I was conscious of the fact that Gemma and Tom, Jessie and I would have to be very truthful, and we couldn't imitate or reflect the tone. And I think I've made that mistake in the past as an actor. I think I've tried to sort of compete with the tone, and it doesn't work. You have to sort of have a grounding and hopefully a naturalistic performance in order for the rest of the movie to do its work and for the audience to be taken along with the story. Otherwise it's sort of inaccessible and it's like a big cartoon. So I found that really exciting and challenging, to make sure that even if surreal things were taking place, that your reaction and the truth was really potent.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Jesse Eisenberg, because the two of you had actually worked together, I think, for the first time about a decade ago when you were in A Solitary Man. I heard that you actually mentioned him as a possibility to the director, Lorcan Finnegan. So what was it about Jesse that you thought that he would bring something really interesting to that character, and had him at the back of your mind to make that suggestion?
Yeah, well, Jesse's I just think he's absolutely fantastic. We worked together, just around 10 years ago, which is bonkers. And even more bonkers was I was playing, I had kissed Michael Douglas, and I was like 18. And anyway, that's deeply surreal in and of itself. But we reunited for a movie called The Art of Self-Defense, which was a black comedy about karate and masculinity. And we had a great time making that together. So when this came around and we needed the male protagonist, I thought of Jesse, and he was totally up for it and available. And that was so cool, not only because I get to work with him again, but also I knew it meant a lot sort of having that person there, because I so value what he thinks. So the fact that he was willing to come on board and support. At one stage the script was quite female centric. It was sort of a lot of Gemma, and I thought that was really amazing that he was like, yeah, I want to go and support Imi in this, and that meant a lot.
That's so fantastic. Given that you've known him for that length of time as an actor, how have you seen his craft as an actor evolve, and what sort of things do you think he's really developed in his performance?
Yeah, well, he'd be really embarrassed if he knew we were talking about him. Yeah, maybe he knows. I think that Jesse is quite misunderstood by people outside of the industry. Perhaps people in the industry love him, he's so beloved. But I think that if you look, his range is extraordinary. And yes, The Social Network seems to be the movie that a lot of cinema fans know him for, but I find he is one of the most prolific, compassionate artists out there, and he touches everyone in the community of theatre and in film. And I love his work in The End of the Tour. I thought that was gorgeous, about David Foster Wallace with Jason Segel. And then also The Double, I thought was just a masterpiece. I just loved that film. I thought he was incredible in that film. I was blown away. And all of his plays that he's written, and some of them he's been in, I just think that he's growing, and he's so brave to do that. I think a lot of fear, unfortunately, but understandably, keeps people in shackles. They don't fully try anything, and I think he's a real risk taker. But he has great empathy. I find sometimes on a day's filming, you have to sort of you have to be aware that you don't end up socially bankrupt. You have to figure out where you're putting your energy on those long days. And I watched Jesse, and he's got it down. He's just incredible the way that he is with people. He's just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, he has such an incredibly varied body of work, which you do as well from that period of time. And I feel like you've worked in so many different genres and with so many different types of filmmakers. What are some of the important things over the last 10 years that you feel like you've really evolved in the way that you approach your craft or prepare for roles?
No, that's really interesting, because I love that question, because I think so often, especially in an interview setup, someone might say, "You're this. How does that feel?" And it's one of the worst things you can hear, because you hope that you have the ability to explore as many different ideas or people as possible and make sense of the world in as many different ways as you can, but also because the people that we were, or the choices that we made even a few years ago, may not reflect what we value now. So I think back to earlier days of being an actor. I hadn't done theatre at that point. I hadn't seen the amount of movies that I have at this point. So inevitably, my world was a lot smaller, and my purview as an actor in the industry was quite limited. And it took people I'd met along the way to say, oh, you should check out film noir, or you got to watch Kelly Reichardt films, or you got to meet my friend David Zellner. He did, that's how you sort of start to build your own, I was going to say like menagerie, but your own sort of world and your own value system. And so I think when I was younger, with movies especially, I was a lot more snobby. I think I was kind of snobby about certain types of films. I was like, well, that's just a franchise. That's like a shiny movie about this and this. But the best actors in the world, if they're doing their job right, it doesn't matter what the movie is. It's a silly preoccupation to have. So I think that sort of disintegrated over the years, and theatre's become a very important part of my life too.
Yeah. With you and Jesse working together on this movie, how did you set about navigating what you thought Gemma and Tom's relationship was going to be, what their history together was going to be, and where it was going to go throughout the film emotionally together?
Yeah, I think, because we had worked together a couple times before, the beauty of that is that Jesse and I sort of knew how the other one worked. So I think you always adjust slightly to your colleagues' process, as it were. You sort of fall in line, hopefully, with each other. And with Jesse specifically, I think we privately sort of did the work as it was, and then we found it together on set. But I think a lot of that was the ease of being around someone that you know so well. It really did feel conversational. But we hadn't played characters like that together before at all. The art of self-defense was quite stylized, and this was very, very naturalistic. So we just wanted to start from a place where you saw this couple who were like excited about their lives and excited about the opportunity, and almost in a way this strange credential of, whoa, we've made it to this place where now we buy our house, and then we do this, and then we do this. And then, of course, that's the horror show that unfolds, is that these people are sort of the donkey and the carrot being led to this idea of paradise, which is actually hell.
I also think there's a really interesting element of your performance, because there's the isolation of the two of them being in this place together and being stuck there, but then also there reaches a point at which they're having a separate journey to each other, and there's isolation within their relationship. So how did you think about those different layers and how you wanted to play that?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful point. I think the loneliness of the relationship is one of the saddest parts. The fact that the two of them start to drift away from each other, and that is the catalyst for that is the boy too, which I found really interesting, just in the sense of how that accentuated the gender roles and really put accents on the idea that he would then do the manual labor and dig the hole, and she would mother the child and teach the child. And it's sort of that in and of itself was really sad, because I felt that in a way Gemma and Tom, they're supposed to be a reflection of a modern day couple, and yet given the time and the circumstances, they sort of were pressured like a pressure cooker into these pre-formed systemic roles that they were meant to conform to.
Yeah, I wanted to, because you mentioned the boy in the film, I wanted to talk about him. Is it Shannon or Senan, how you say his name?
Senan Jennings is the name.
Because he's so wonderful, but I think there's a really fascinating element to his performance, because the voice that he is actually using in the film is not his own. So there's an ADR voice that's dubbed over it. So how did that affect the way that you were performing, and how much did you know about what his voice was going to sound like in the film?
Yeah, well, I felt conflicted at first when I heard about it, because it happened in post, actually. So up until that point, we were just acting with Senan and his sweet dulcet tones, his voice. But yeah, I felt conflicted because I thought, well, that's sort of, you're taking away like an actor's eyes or something. But I think it lent a lot to the film. Perhaps we would have felt far too much empathy towards Senan if that hadn't happened, his character. But I really had an amazing time with him. He was one of those child actors who really loved it and was there because he loved it, and his mum was totally normal, and that's always a relief because she was walking around like, this is crazy, and I was like, that's a good thing, you should think that, it's not normal, none of this is normal, especially not this film. But he was really, really great, and I think he sort of understood. I think he understood that what it was. He knew that it wasn't reality, but he knew that it wasn't like a mad cartoon, and he knew that Jessie and I were actually mentally stable-ish, even though our characters weren't. So.
And what was the type of environment that Lorcan and Finnegan created to make a really conducive space for the three of you to have performance? Because it's very different when you're really just a cast of three as opposed to a larger cast, background actors everywhere, and a whole crew, essentially.
Absolutely, a good point. I mean, you'd think actually, well, there's only three to four cast members, so it's surely got to be a very smooth experience. But I think because of the nature of the film, there was so much technically that had to be achieved each day, and lighting being configured, or sort of certain gels being changed, or special effects taking place, that did take up a large chunk of the day. So when we came to doing the scenes themselves, I found Lorcan was really aware that we needed time, as much time as possible. Even though they're simple scenes on the page, he was extremely understanding of the different options you therefore want to try to figure out what this story is. It wasn't entirely obvious. And Lorcan comes from a visual background. And a genre background too, and I think his brother is also in like claymation, so they're very artistic, and so it's sort of, how does that marry with performance, and what was he looking for, and all of that together, it just led to a really open work environment, and I think that benefited the film, because with independent cinema, you never know sort of if you're going to be shut down the next day. You don't know how much time you've got left per day. And you'd think that all the things that would help you out, like you're filming inside a studio, so you don't have to worry about daylight hours or anything else. But we're still up against it.
Yeah, there's still a budget and a limited amount of time.
Yes.
What were some of the things that he helped you to discover and really understand about Gemma? Because he also wrote the script as well.
Yeah, he did. He wrote it with Garrett Shanley, who's really, really wonderful. He was interesting, Lorcan. He gave me some amazing references to go away and watch prior to making the film. So Woman in the Dunes, the Japanese movie, Todd Haynes' Safe, and Shane Carruth's Upstream Colour. Those were some sort of movies that he'd mentioned, which got me really excited. Because if he'd just been like, yeah, I just want to be like David Lynch, and I want to like, I'd be like, well, good luck. But he actually had some really interesting movies for me to go and see. So I think he sort of left it open to Jessie and I what we wanted to interpret the movie as. And when we were doing press for the film, when we were all allowed to be around other people, those days are gone, he actually said the gender role part of it was something that he felt had landed with me more than he'd perhaps given it huge consideration beforehand. He felt he'd been more focused on sort of other things. So I think that's just the way it works with a movie with that sort of metaphorical undertone, is that people pick out what they want to, or what helps them make sense of the world or the story.
Yeah, I think it was because you were mentioning the idea of being together, and obviously you've taken a lot of films to film festivals throughout the world over your career as well. What's some of the connectivity that you find really important and really connects you to audiences in a unique way in those sorts of spaces?
Oh, I love film festivals. It's funny, I didn't envision, I mean, whoever knows how their career is going to turn out or what road you're going to walk down, but that's been a part of the last decade which I've just held so sacred, because you get to bring movies to big festivals or obscure festivals, and it's the same passion that the audiences have to turn up, and they're willing, they want to see something. They're there, they're sat down, and they're there for the good of the movie. But I think the tribe nature of these film festivals are great too, because you bump into people. I think actually even Jesse Eisenberg and I hadn't seen each other in years, and he was at Toronto with the Double, and I was there with the Jimi Hendrix movie, and he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And you can go see each other's stuff, and you get to see movies before anyone else, but also you might see things that perhaps never get bought, which is a real shame, but they're often like the kookiest ones out there. But I think they're great platforms for filmmakers who are thinking outside the box, especially things like South by Southwest, and there's a couple others dotted around.
Yeah, I hope that we can be back in those spaces again soon. I wanted to talk a little bit as well about your upcoming HBO series, I Know This Much Is True, which is based on the revered book by Wally Lamb, which I think might be the biggest book I've ever lugged around in a backpack as a teenager. And it comes from Derek Cianfrance, who's such a talented and amazing filmmaker. How did he set about communicating with you and the rest of the cast to really make sure that he was pulling out the best performance from you all?
Oh, he was amazing. Derek knocked my socks off. I'd been a fan of his forever, and I'd emailed him over the years, sort of like, hello, it's me again, that creepy actor. What are you making? I'd love to make you tea. And he came around with this, and it was so fascinating, because the book is brilliant, and I thought that the scripts were fantastic, how they had adapted the book, and the cast he had assembled was royalty. But what I thought was amazing about Derek is my role in the show is certainly it's a smaller role in the show, but that did not prevent Derek from taking the greatest focus and concentration and support with me as an actor to find out every single corner of this person we could. And we met many times before the filming. I worked with this incredible woman called Greta Seacat, who works with dreams, actually, which I hadn't done before, and I found really, really eye-opening and really important, actually. So I found his total devotion to his actors mind-blowing, and I think he had great support as well from the people making the show, so that he could cast who he wanted and he could shoot on film. So we'd do these takes that were 20 minutes or so, and that, I never thought I'd get to do that in my lifetime. It was the most brilliant film set to be on, and he has great faith. The trust and the faith that he has in his actors just spurs you on. You want to do the best work possible for him.
Yeah, and obviously Mark Ruffalo is in 2 lead parts, not just one. He's playing his own twin in it, which must be really fascinating to get to see up close how he does that and how he approaches his craft. And I was interested what you learned just from watching him day to day on set.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is something else. And I knew before working with him that he was. Everyone who knows Mark or has worked with him just adores him. He is so beloved. The way that he is on set is wonderful because he's totally present. He must have been exhausted during the shoot. It was a long one, 6-7 months or something, if not longer, and playing these 2 parts. He's also got a family, and he had so much on his plate, and yet in between takes he's right there with you. And often because of the film set that Derek Cianfrance creates and the people that he works with, it's a bunch of cinephiles, and they're all sat around being like, oh, did you see this one? Did you see that? Or have you read this? It's that sort of family that they construct around the filming that's so beautiful. And Mark was right at the center of that, and was very aware of, these characters coming in and out. And there are some amazing actresses in the show, so that was very important to all of the guys. But really, he's just the coolest. He's just so wonderful. And it was very hard because we had to be really mean to each other. And it's really hard to be mean to someone who's that lovely. But he was great fun. He's a joker. He's a real joker. So it was great.
I also think it's really great that HBO have hired intimacy coordinators now across all of the shows that they're making. And I was interested in how that, for you as an actor, makes you feel safe at every level of your performance. And also if it was the first time that you had worked with one, because it's becoming a more commonplace thing in the entertainment industry now.
I am the biggest fan of intimacy coordinators. I'd never worked with one before, until I know this much is true. And yet I'd done, many intimate scenes before. So it was really interesting having it. I think I was at first nervous from a selfish point of view of, is it going to be too many cooks in the kitchen? Is someone going to sort of get in the way of what's natural and truthful in the moment? But it's not about that at all. It's really about making sure that you're covered in more than one way and more than one sense, because I feel that at the beginning of my career as a very young teenager, I think I was lucky. I think I was very lucky that I did not collide with any sinister activity. And I don't know if I could say the same for a lot of other peers I have, and women and men coming up through the industry, to have that second pair of eyes, professional eyes that are totally checking out what's happening, where you are, what the scene is. I mean, I've in the past done sex scenes and I've had the costume designer, we've been using Band-Aids to cover up things, and then I'm like, will you check on the thing and I'd say that I give you permission that you can, it's all so hodgepodge. And to have this clear, lucid professionalism on set is a great relief for people coming up through the industry, and also for all of us actors. Although I did call her, she was great. I called her, I said, am I meant to have like a merkin for the scene? And she was like, well, do you want one? I was like, no, I don't think that. It's like a huge pubic wig, but I didn't know if I was sort of supposed to do that. And she was like, no, I think whatever you're comfortable with. So you can also have a laugh about some of the slight, the strange things that come up.
And what were the things that making that show uniquely challenged for you as an actor?
Well, I think working with someone who I revered for so long, Derek, was really interesting, because as soon as you turn up on set, it's just it's another job, not making it sound sort of in any way dull. If anything, it's sort of the incredible nature of people like that who just relax you. I think the greatest artists do that. They put everybody else at ease when they're sort of helming or leading the show. But in the sense of you're asking about the challenges of it, the most, I think, just trying to make the most of the responsibility I had to this woman. And I think Joy is very specific in how she's written, actually, in the book, by Wally Lamb. And I think I can say this, but it was a male voice writing about this woman, and probably for the sake of the story, there was a certain shade, color, or of her aura as a person, and it wasn't necessarily the nicest one. So I sort of wanted to defend her, and I feel like Joy is representative of a lot of people out there who don't really have much of a choice. It's almost like their luck ran out, or something like that. She's quite a tragic figure. So I wanted to really make sure that it didn't just slide into that. So my challenge was really to make sure that Joy might be defensible, and there might be people out there who are rooting for her.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that show. And I hope also that everyone tuning in and watching this video right now will check out VIVARIUM, which is available now on video on demand. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us and being so open about talking about your craft and how you think about everything. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, and stay safe and look after yourself.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
All right, take care.